Saudi Arabia and Iran, Armenia and Azerbaijan, the United States and China. Some countries just kinda hate each other, so let's get into that. Starting with Russia and Ukraine. This is probably the most prominent beef of the modern era. Russia sees Ukraine as a part of its historic sphere of influence. Ukraine sees that as a little bit scary. And the West is just hoping this feud doesn't turn into World War III. You see, Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union until 1991 when the USSR finally crumbled. And each of its 15 Soviet socialist republics became their own independent countries. So Russia had to say goodbye to Ukraine, but never emotionally moved on, let's be real here. As years and decades continued to pass, Ukraine began to lean closer and closer to the West. EU, NATO, all that. And away from Moscow's orbit. That was a problem for Russia, especially as the practically US-led NATO continued to grow in Europe, admitting new countries closer and closer to Russia's door. Things came to a boil in 2013 when Ukraine's pro-Russian president Viktor Yanukovych suddenly backed out of an EU association agreement. And the Ukrainians were not having it. They were a little bit pissed, you could say. Massive protests erupted in Kiev's Maidan Square, demanding closer ties with Europe, and a future that frankly didn't involve Vladdy Daddy, to his dismay. This movement became known as Euromaidan. It was basically Ukraine's little "we want to be a part of the EU" moment. Long story short, the protests turned into an all-out revolution, and Yanukovych had to flee the country to Russia, unsurprisingly. And Russia, you could say, abso-frickin-lutely lost it. In 2014, Russia invaded and annexed the Crimean Peninsula in the Black Sea. It was basically a hostile land grab with a little bit of a phony referendum sprinkled on top. And then pro-Russian separatists began fighting in the eastern region of Ukraine known as the Donbass. And the conflict eventually simmered down for years. Until, as you probably know, 2022, when Russia basically said, you know what, we're gonna go all in. We'll probably be in Kiev in a couple of days. And fast forward to 2025, we are still here. Putin launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine called a special military operation to denazify Ukraine. Which, I mean, to denazify Ukraine, I feel like I've come up with better excuses to not attend functions I didn't want to go to. But anyway, the West responded quickly, slapping Russia with a bunch of heavy sanctions. NATO countries sent military aid to Ukraine. The ruble fell. McDonald's kind of left Russia. Now they have Vkushnaya Tochka, bootleg GTA 5 ass McDonald's. I don't know. And Ukraine, to the world's surprise, actually held out pretty strong. Russian forces stalled, and the conflict has become a grinding war of attrition with really no end in sight anytime soon at the time of recording. But this all begs the question, why does Russia care so much? Really, it's part geopolitical paranoia and historic nationalism. You see, Putin sees Ukraine not just as a neighbor, but as a vital piece of Russian history. They're both Slavic nations, they were both part of the Soviet Union, and Putin views it as losing Ukraine to the West, which also in his view probably means losing Russia's place in the world. I mean, imagine if like the US collapsed and then Texas started hanging out with China. I don't know if that's a good comparison, but you can imagine it'd be kind of weird. Ukraine, meanwhile, just wants to decide its own future, whether that means joining the EU or NATO or not being bombed for a little while. So will these two ever make up? Maybe eventually, but probably not anytime soon. As long as Russia sees Ukraine as the one that got away, and Ukraine sees Russia as the abusive ex breaking through the window with the hammer, things will not be simmering down anytime soon, I don't think. And yes, as you know, Russia does indeed have nuclear weapons, the most in the world, in fact. So this conflict is gonna stay probably at the tippity top of my please do not spiral out of control conflict watch list. And honestly, if anything, this war has just served to further divide the people of Ukraine and Russia, even pushing countries like Finland and Sweden to join NATO since. So, oops. But while Russia has been busy trying to redraw its borders in Ukraine, it's also been accidentally losing friends elsewhere. Like Armenia. Because when Armenia needed help against Azerbaijan, Russia basically ghosted. It's time for Armenia and Azerbaijan. This one centers around a region called Nagorno-Karabakh, which is a piece of land that both countries claim. So here's the setup. Nagorno-Karabakh is within Azerbaijan's borders, fully surrounded, but it's mostly populated by ethnic Armenians. So naturally, both sides think it's theirs. You can see where a bit of an issue might arise. You see, back in the old Soviet days, Nagorno-Karabakh was officially part of the Azerbaijani Soviet Socialist Republic, but it had a ton of autonomy. Like, don't touch my culture or I riot type of deal. But when the Soviet Union collapsed in the early 90s, the gloves came off, and Armenia and Azerbaijan just went to war. Tens of thousands of people died, and Armenia ended up controlling Nagorno-Karabakh and a bunch of other surrounding areas, which you can imagine Azerbaijan was not particularly thrilled about. Fast forward to 2020, and Azerbaijan was like, alright, new plan, we're taking it back. They launched a 6-week war, used drones, and took back a ton of territory. It ended with a Russian-brokered ceasefire where Azerbaijan regained control of some of its internationally recognized land. And Russian peacekeepers were stationed to keep the peace, but that spoiler alert, that just did not last very long. In 2023, Azerbaijan launched another operation, retook full control of Nagorno-Karabakh, and within days, 120,000 ethnic Armenians fled the region. Basically overnight, just up and left their homes. Armenia called it ethnic cleansing, Azerbaijan called it restoring order, and the international community was just like, you cannot be serious, we have another one of these. Are you serious? Armenia and Azerbaijan have a ton of cultural and religious differences. Armenia is mostly Christian, while Azerbaijan is mostly Muslim, and now a whole new wave of displacement. These two do not love each other very much. Also, Turkey is like BFF besties, fellow Turkic nation, slumber party, friends with Azerbaijan, and Russia has historically backed Armenia. But Armenia is beginning to distance itself a bit from Russia, even beginning the process of leaving the Collective Security Treaty Organization, which is like Russia's Timu vodka drunk version of NATO. And the reason for that is Armenia feels like Russia's not really doing its part in protecting Armenia because they're a part of this organization, but Russia's busy doing their own thing in Ukraine, not really helping the Armenians. You can see where a little bit of an issue might be there. So yeah, the Caucasus is just full of a bunch of drama that is just actually beyond me. It's insane. And they don't really seem to be getting any less tense anytime soon. Speaking of dramatic power struggles, it's time we head over to the Middle East for Saudi Arabia and Iran. This beef kind of involves everything. Religion, oil, proxy wars, nuclear tensions, you name it, it's probably something that they dislike each other over. Saudi Arabia is a Sunni Muslim monarch, while Iran is a Shia Muslim theocracy, which basically means that religion is just like running the government type of deal. The two branches of Islam split centuries ago, and these two nations have picked up their own torches and headed in opposite directions. But it's not just religion. Both countries want to be the regional heavyweight. And since they can't go to war directly, cause, you know, that's expensive and messy, we're not trying to clutter ourselves with that. They like to fight indirectly by backing opposite sides of conflicts in other countries. That kind of reminds me of another historical duo. Anyway, like in Yemen, where the Saudis back the Yemeni government and Iran backs the Houthi rebels. Or in Syria, where Iran backed the Assad regime while Saudi Arabia backed the opposition. And in Lebanon, where Saudi Arabia backs the Lebanese government and Iran backs Hezbollah. And in Iraq too, where Iran backs a lot of Shia militias while Saudi Arabia doesn't really like that. Basically, if there's some kind of conflict in our favorite oil sandbox, Saudi Arabia and Iran are probably on opposite sides of it. And speaking of oil, it is also about oil, image, and nukes. You see, Saudi Arabia has money, glam, and is in the process of a major rebrand right now. Basically, think concerts, esports, Formula One, and trying to be a little bit like these guys over here. Iran, meanwhile, has more sanctions, isolation, death to America kind of vibe. Oh yeah, and the US supports Saudi Arabia, while Iran, not so much. You can see the 1979 revolution and hostage crisis for more info on that. And then there's the trillion-dollar nuclear question. Iran says it's enriching uranium just for peaceful civilian applications. What could go wrong? And Saudi Arabia and everyone else are a little bit like, yeah, that's bullshit. And if Iran gets a nuke, Saudi Arabia has made it pretty clear they're getting one too. Now in 2023, China brokered a diplomatic thaw between the two. They shook hands and restored formal ties for the first time in years. But let's be real here, the rivalry is far from over and it's not going away anytime soon. Just like the rivalry between Egypt and Ethiopia. You might be a little surprised here, most people don't know about this conflict. So let me introduce you to the world's highest stakes water fight. This one involves a little something called the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, or the GERD. I'm just gonna call it GERD, which sounds a little something like a stomach condition, but it's actually Africa's largest hydroelectric project. Ethiopia built this massive dam on the Blue Nile, which is the main tributary to the Nile River, which is like, you know, the one that Egypt depends on for literally everything. And when I say everything, I mean 95% of Egypt's population lives along the Nile. You can see Egypt at night. It is a freaking line. The country is the river. The river is basically Egypt's only source of fresh water. So without it, you're looking at the thirsty Arab Republic of Egypt, trademark. So Ethiopia's like, yo, we need electricity for our 120 million people. This dam is gonna power the future and it's gonna be pretty freaking awesome. And Egypt's like, if you touch one drop of that water, I will be throwing hands. Here's the deal. It all comes down to how quickly Ethiopia fills the dam. Ethiopia wants to fill it quickly to start producing power. Egypt, though, wants it filled slowly, like over a decade, so they don't suffer massive water shortages. And Sudan, who's in the middle of the two and also downstream, is like, we just don't want our crops ruined. Also, please don't go to war. war. Egypt's claim to the Nile is rooted deep in its history and identity, going back freaking ancient times. I mean, these people have been living on that thing for like ever. They point to colonial era treaties from 1929 and 1959 that gave them most of the water control. And Ethiopia is just like, we weren't invited to that, so we kind of don't care. Egypt has hinted multiple times that all options are on the table when it comes to this kind of stuff, which is basically diplomat speak for, we're gonna bomb you if shit hits the fan. But in reality, both countries know that an actual war would be incredibly costly, expensive, dumb, all of the above. So instead, they're stuck in the endless loop of talks in Cairo, talks in Addis Ababa, talks in Khartoum, no one agreeing, and everyone posting angry press releases. We love to see it. Not really, we don't. Overall, Ethiopia sees the gird as a symbol of national pride and a representation of African progress. Egypt sees it as an existential threat, like you're outside with your friend and he wants to waterfall your water bottle and he just drinks the whole thing. That's kind of what's going on here. And Sudan is just kind of a nervous third wheel with bigger problems on its platter. That could be a whole video on its own. So will they ever agree? I don't really know, but I can tell you for a fact that right now it is the world's most tense three-way geopolitical staring contest over a multi-billion-dollar water faucet. Now, at least Egypt and Ethiopia have someone between them, that being Sudan. But you know who doesn't? Romania and Hungary. The drama here begins with Transylvania. Yes, that's Transylvania. Except nowadays, instead of stealing your blood, they'll just steal the wallet out of your back pocket. I'm sorry, the joke is as old as Transylvania itself. For centuries, Transylvania was a part of the Kingdom of Hungary. But after World War I, and specifically the Treaty of Trianon in 1920, Hungary kind of got absolutely clapped and lost like 2/3 of its territory. And Transylvania was handed over to Romania. As you can imagine, Hungarians were, and even still 100 years later are, not exactly thrilled and happy with this arrangement. To this day, many Hungarians see the Treaty of Trianon as a national tragedy, while Romanians see it as an overdue correction. Transylvania is very much a part of Romania, but there are still over 1 million ethnic Hungarians living there. So naturally, we've got language rights battles, school curriculum drama, disputes over signs in Romanian and Hungarian. But wait, aren't they both in the EU? I hear all of my viewers with too much free time on their hands asking. Yes, they indeed are both EU members. But even inside the big, rich, dysfunctional European family, Hungary will criticize Romania's treatment of Hungarian minorities, Romania will clap back about Hungarian nationalism, and both will occasionally veto each other's initiatives out of spite. Romanians and Hungarians argue about who built what, who lived where first, and who deserves credit for the architecture, traditions, and folk costumes. It's kind of crazy. So will it ever get like ugly? No. Literally no chance. This isn't a war on the horizon kind of situation. It's more of like a very subtle, deeply tucha drunk influenced beef that never goes away interiorly. What did I just say? That was a word salad. Basically, no one's getting invaded ever, but I mean, the Hungarians are also not getting over the Treaty of Trianon. They did in fact lose 2/3 of their country. Next conflict, France and Algeria. This one all starts with colonization, obviously. In 1830, France invaded Algeria and eventually decided that this is no longer just gonna be a colony. This is going to be France. Like, we're dividing this up into departments, and this is the mainland now. As you can imagine, the locals, as anyone finding out that they were about to become French would, reacted with pure horror. So the French sent about 1 million European settlers to Algeria who became known as Pieds Noirs, or Black Feet. Meanwhile, Algerians, who were mostly Muslim and Arab or Berber, were kind of treated as second-class citizens in their own land. And by the 1950s, the Algerians had had enough. In 1954, the National Liberation Front launched a full-scale independence war effort against France. And this war was brutal. It lasted 8 years, killed hundreds of thousands at least. The Algerians claim over 1 million, but the number is disputed, and left scars on both sides. It was bad. The French public was deeply divided over the war, kind of like the Vietnam War in the US, and the government in France almost even collapsed because of it. Eventually, in 1962, Algeria did in fact gain full independence. France left, but the damage was done, and the relationship has been pretty shit ever since. Today, millions of people of Algerian descent live in France, making them the largest immigrant group in the entire country. French is still widely spoken in Algeria. Algerian rappers, footballers, and food are everywhere in France. And so really, the two countries are deeply entangled, but sometimes not always in a happy way. But frankly, no love-hate relationship is as intertwined as that between the United States and China. Welcome to the main geopolitical event of the 21st century. Two global superpowers walk in, and only one leaves alive. Well, actually, let's just hope that doesn't happen. I think a war between these two would probably end humanity. Anyway, for a while, the US was just kind of chilling at the top of the global power leaderboard. After the collapse of the USSR, the Americans were left all alone at the top with no other superpower to despise. How sad. Military, number 1. Economy, number 1. Brands, influence, etc., number 1. Then came China, who went a little something like, okay, what if we built 400 cities in like 20 years, took over half of global manufacturing for funsies, and launched a TikTok app that owns your soul? How about that? Also Panda Express. We didn't do that, though. So they did exactly that, minus the Panda Express part. China began experimenting with capitalism and loosening up some of its markets, and surprise, surprise, it worked. Now China is the second largest economy in the world, the largest by PPP, the biggest exporter in the world, and the reason that everything in your house says made in China on it. I mean, literally everything. This camera was made in Japan, but most things in your life were made in China. So naturally, being used to all the space on the podium, now the US is feeling a little bit crowded. But there's more to it than a podium where there can only be one, because there are several points of contention between these two. First of all is trade. For decades, American companies were moving their manufacturing to China, so jobs were leaving the US. Places like the Midwest and the Rust Belt were really suffering. So in 2018, the US slapped tariffs on Chinese goods, and China did the same back. Boom! Trade war. Now in 2025, Donnie's back again, and guess what? Boom, more tariffs both ways. Kind of another trade war. Although things have cooled off a little bit since. The second thing is Taiwan. This is the spiciest issue on the table for sure. The US says we support Taiwan's right to exist. Kind of. Not really. We're not going to say we do, but you know we do. And China says Taiwan is ours. Like, period. You're not touching that thing. The US sells Taiwan weapons, but won't officially recognize it as a country. Strategic ambiguity, baby. We talked a little bit about that in part 1 of this video. So if you want to watch that, click up there. It's very freaking good. I would recommend. I made it, so I'm incredibly biased. Every time a US politician visits Taiwan, China will respond with a bunch of military exercises off the coast. It's a whole thing. The third thing is tech. It's not just about TikTok. It's about AI, chips, quantum computing, 5G, everything that powers the future. The US bans Huawei. China bans YouTube, Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, etc. Literally everything you use and are addicted to on a daily basis. And both countries are quietly racing to see who can get the better AI first that will replace you and everything that you do, and me too, probably. We're screwed is what I'm trying to tell you. Yeah, the Americans will come out with something like ChatGPT, and the Chinese will always find a way to undercut, making it cheaper with something like DeepSeek. I don't know if you remember that last year, but that was a whole thing that happened, and everyone was freaking out about that. Does anyone use DeepSeek now? I don't know. Number 4 is spy stuff. Generally, there's always some spy balloon or cyber attack or surveillance accusation floating around. In 2023, China was accused of planting malware in US infrastructure. The US was accused of using Apple products to spy on China. And somehow both countries acted absolutely shocked. Like, I mean, I feel like espionage is kind of their thing. Like, no one is surprised. Number 5 is global influence. China is investing billions in Africa, Asia, and Latin America through its Belt and Road Initiative. And the US is like, hey guys, don't forget who invented Marvel movies. I have Marvel movies and Star Wars and other. I have diabetic food as well. It's basically a soft power flex off, like, you know, Instagram versus infrastructure. In terms of infrastructure and trade, China is definitely winning. But we still do got Marvel movies over here. So yeah, red, white, blue, baby, come and take it, mother. So will they go to war? I certainly hope not. They both have a lot of tech, a lot of people, and a lot of freaking nukes as well, and a dependence on each other that is just so intertwined at this point. It's like they both want to break up, but they both also kind of need each other to survive financially. Also, yeah, they would definitely draft my ass in the war too, so please do not fight. I'm not trying to die in the middle of a field in a Chinese province I can't even pronounce the name of. But make no mistake, this is the rivalry of our time. Like the US and USSR of the last century, same thing. It's like the Cold War 2.0, but instead of missile silos and the Berlin Wall, it's just brain rot. It's all brain rot. If you missed part 1 where I covered 6 other country duos, then make sure to go waste your time with that one as well. That was a great video. That's all for now. Be sure to like and subscribe to boost the algorithm on this video. I would really like for this to get views. And until next time, goodbye.